What's up, y'all? It's Pardes from yesterday, and in case you didn't know who I am, I'm a girl that is 28 years old and has, for my entire life, wanted to make money and be free and independent and not be a wifey. But I always wanted to have family and kids and still fall in love and, all that stuff. But I just always wanted to be like a career woman that is like independent financially. I feel like I've kind of like reached this point where I've proven to myself that I can make money, like somehow. And I also have proven to myself that making money does not make you smarter. It just makes you willing. It just, you don't need to have a lot of money to make money. You don't need to have a lot of brains to make money. I finally have proven to myself all you need to have in order to make money is wanting to make money and being willing to move. So that's like, those are basically like my two things. Like, you want to make money, you're willing to move. That's all you need in order to make money in however way that you want. And so those are the two things that I realized. And part of the reason why this is like so important for me is because growing up, like, I lived in a very traditional community growing up where like the women were primarily, Persian, and like, I feel really bad to dunk on it because there's so many good things about like traditional family stuff, and like it produces a lot of structure, and there's a lot of very successful, happy, wealthy families that come out of this traditional structure. And so I grew up in a very traditional family structure where like, my whole community, the women were primarily in charge of like taking care of all the household duties and the kids and everything. And the men were primarily in charge of taking care of the finance and, protecting the family in terms of like outside of the house. So the men were in charge of outside of the house, women were in charge of inside the house. And that really bothered me because growing up, I saw how hard it was to raise kids. I saw how hard it was for my mom to raise kids. And I saw how hard it was for my dad to make money outside. And I saw that there was not really a lot of communication in between the two. My parents, were in such different worlds. And not just my parents, I noticed a lot of my friends' parents, a lot of other people, the men were just always outside dealing with outside stuff. The women were always inside dealing with inside stuff, and the kids and everything like that. And it bothered me because, these families would have a lot of kids. They were religious. They were not only traditional, they were also religious. They would have a lot of kids. And the jokes and arguments that I saw my entire life growing up were always about women not understanding what happened outside of the house and the men not understanding what happened inside the house. It was just so segregated, and the lack of understanding between the two genders was so deep. And it was like, coming out in the secular world, I would say stuff like, I would go on Twitter and, being part of the secular world for 2 seconds, I would go on Twitter and I would see these American career women going on Twitter and saying, we love traditional values, be a housewife, especially like these conservatives, trad girls on Twitter who have like 20 different college degrees, university degrees. They were career women, and they were like, had a bunch of college degrees, and they had jobs, and they were completely self-independent, and they were like in their 30s and 40s, and they would go on Twitter and say, I'm a conservative, I'm a traditional woman. I think, and they've slept with so many men before they even decided to get to this point. And they would go on and they would say, I am a conservative, traditional woman. I think that all women, should not be career women and should be home in the kitchen, yeah. And that would get me so mad because I grew up in a house like that where women were in the kitchen. But these women, to me, did not understand what that meant. They did not understand what a traditional housewife was. In their mind, a traditional housewife meant that after you've slept with all the men that you've slept with, and after you've gotten all your college degrees that you got, and after you have proven to yourself that you can take care of yourself completely independently, financially, outside of any man's home, then in your 30s and 40s, you like kick back and have a man paying your bills while you do some stuff in the kitchen. And you still get to keep your Twitter account, and you still get to keep your career, and you still get to keep doing all the things you're doing, but like, you're not the sole caretaker, you know, you have a man that is helping you. And like, so to me, like, I felt this is just a miscommunication, because I would go on Twitter and I would say stuff like traditional gender roles cause more miscommunication between the genders. I would say stuff that I saw growing up, which was men and women don't understand each other. In order for men and women to understand each other, women should have to, maybe a few years at least before marriage, women should be forced to learn about money, how to be financially independent. And then going into the marriage, they're more likely going to appreciate what a man has to do when he's doing that. And I think that men, for a few years before marriage, should be forced to be completely self-independent, self-sufficient, not have their mom cooking dinners for them. Don't let your mom cook dinners for you or clean for you or do your laundry. You should be completely independent, living in your own house, cooking your own food, cleaning yourself, doing your own laundry, and understand that these aren't, your house, taking care of your home and your clothes and your meals and your schedule and like all these things is not easy. You have to understand that that's hard. You have to learn how to do that yourself. So so that there's at least some kind of understanding between the sexes. And for me, I wanted more than just understanding. I wanted to feel like a partner. I wanted to feel like, I'm not completely over there and my partner is completely over there. I wanted to feel like we're a team. And that's why I would go on Twitter and I would like criticize traditional gender roles. And I would criticize traditional households where it was deliberately, you women stay home, you men take care of the finances. That's why I would always criticize it. And then these women, these career women who call themselves conservative would come back at me like, I'm a housewife, I'm a traditional housewife, and I'd be thinking to myself, no, you're not. No, you're not. Now, after years of having worked your own jobs, saved up yourself, become completely independent, even if you're not financially independent right now, you've built in your mind an arsenal of ways to survive on your own. So you understand if someone dropped you in another planet, you would understand the very basics of how to survive. You're an American westernized woman. When I think about traditional housewives, I think about Iranian, Middle Eastern women. That's what I think about. I think about like the schools I went to, they don't believe that women have property rights. That was why real estate was such a big thing for me. I wanted to own real estate because I wanted property rights. They don't believe that women should have property rights. They don't believe women should be allowed any kind of like intellectual or financial or like spiritual freedom. You are completely like an object that belongs to either your father, your husband, and like your future and even your portion in the world to come is completely belonging to your husband or your father in your future. And people are going to be like, oh, but you're Jewish, not Muslim. Judaism has that too, especially, Persian Jews tend to be very similar to Persian Muslims, it's still Judaism and it's still less intense than Islam. Judaism is never going to be as intense as Islam when it comes to standing over your woman, but it's but culturally there is still going to be a lot of similarities, you know, because it's still Middle Eastern. And also primarily the schools that my parents raised us in going to were like ultra-Orthodox schools, very traditional and very religious. And even the yeshivish people that we were around, there was, you know, like people will say, oh, well, the yeshivish circles, the women have jobs, you know, but it wasn't in order to be self-sufficient. It was really the women would have jobs in order to support the men doing the important thing, which is learning Torah. I'm not going to go into that, but I always wanted to make a big, huge splash, and I always wanted to be as public as possible and say whatever I wanted to say on the internet. So whether like if you're like a Western woman who has had a job before and you know how to support yourself and you have a college degree or even your high school diploma and you know how to read and write and you're like out there in the world, you know what your social security number is, you know how to do your taxes, and you're like in your 30s and you're like getting married now to a man and the man is financially helping you and you're like right now cleaning in your kitchen and you're coming at me and saying, I'm a traditional housewife. You better shut your mouth and stop talking smack about housewives. Like, I'm not talking about you because you're not a traditional housewife. From my perspective, you don't come from that world that I'm criticizing. I'm not criticizing you or your lifestyle because that's not what I'm talking about at all. You're like, as far as I'm concerned, you're a Western woman who is like now getting married and you're like now, you know, and you're just doing something that feels natural for you, which is great. Like, that's probably what I'm gonna do. You know, it's probably not what I'm gonna do, but it's probably what I'm gonna do on some level. But I'm just saying that it's still really important, I think, for men and women to learn how to be completely self-sufficient financially and in the house and emotionally. Like, learn how to take care of yourself so that when you find the right person that can help take care of you or that you know you can help take care of, like, there's gonna be more peace and like more understanding and more of feeling of partnership and cohesiveness rather than one person feeling dependent on the other person feeling resentful that like the other person, you know, I'm giving this much of myself and the other person doesn't appreciate me or whatever. Like, when you can learn how to be completely self-sufficient, completely at peace with being with yourself at the very basic level. It doesn't have to be like more than basic, but just at a very basic level. If push comes to shove, I can be alone, I can take care of myself, I can feed myself, survive, I can feel emotionally okay with myself. If you can do that, you're more likely to have a better relationship, in my humble opinion. And also, I don't want to criticize like very, very traditional women either, because that setup works for their lives. It's just seeing it up front growing up, like, it really bothered me. And so, like, you know, I just get bothered by even the idea of traditional woman. But I understand that Americans don't see traditional the same way that I see traditional. For me, traditional is all the way that extreme. For Americans, maybe traditional is like where I see as kind of modern. So if I ever criticize traditional families, and, you know, I just want y'all to know, because my audience is mostly American, I just want you to know that, like, it's probably not I'm probably not criticizing what you think I'm criticizing. I'm probably criticizing over there, Middle Eastern culture, and not American traditional, which is, as by my standards, which is pretty modern, actually. I'm gonna go now, and I'm gonna go do some editing. Thanks for watching.